Picture the most lethal conventional missile in NATO's arsenal. A weapon that strikes a target 300 kilometers away. For decades, one country built it. The United States. Only the United States. Now picture that same missile rolling off a production line in a quiet German town. That factory is real. The deal is signed. And it redraws the map of Western firepower. But there's a catch. A single line buried in the fine print. Europe will build the missile. Washington still decides when it can fire. That contradiction sits at the heart of Europe's defense boom, and today, we walk right into it. You're listening to the Veritas Brief. We're the podcast from Veritas Europea. Reader-funded, ad-free, beholden to no one but you. We take one story from the crossroads of European power, finance, and geopolitics, and we slow it down. We follow the money until it tells the truth. Today's brief, the 2026 NATO summit in Ankara, and how a single weekend rewired the transatlantic arms industry. Over the next 20 minutes, we'll unpack more than 50 billion euros in new deals. We'll meet the German factory at the center of it all, and we'll expose the paradox that could define the next decade of European security. Let's get into it. The Hague set the target, Ankara spent it. First, the backdrop, because Ankara didn't happen in a vacuum. Rewind to 2025. At the summit in The Hague, NATO's members made a staggering promise. 5% of national income spent on defense by 2035. Read that again. 5%. For most of Europe, that's a doubling, sometimes more. It's the largest peacetime rearmament the continent has attempted in generations. The Hague set the number. But numbers are easy. Spending them is hard. So when leaders gathered in Ankara this July, the question had changed. Not, how much will you pledge, but what have you actually bought? The Secretary General, Mark Rutte, set the tone. He said the hum of machinery must now become a roar. The message was blunt. Stop announcing, start delivering. And on paper, deliver they did. Ankara's ledger, line by line. So let's read the receipts. At the Beştepe presidential complex, allies announced over 50 billion euros in fresh procurement. New tanks, jets, missiles, and ships. They committed $40 billion to a program called Drone Edge. That's uncrewed systems, the drones that now define the modern battlefield. The money runs through 2031. They pledged 27 billion euros to fuel infrastructure, pipelines and depots, pushing supply toward NATO's eastern flank. And they promised Ukraine 70 billion euros in military support this year alone, then pledged to match it in 2027. The specific contracts poured in too. Sweden's Saab won orders for Global Eye radar planes, the eyes that replace NATO's aging AWACS fleet. Northrop Grumman landed maritime Triton drones, teamed with Airbus. Denmark agreed to buy Boeing's Poseidon patrol aircraft. Added up, Ankara reads less like a summit, more like a shopping list. But one deal towered over the rest. A missile made in Germany, owned by Washington. That deal was the missile we opened with. On the 7th of July, Lockheed Martin and the German giant Rheinmetall signed an agreement. Together, they'll co-produce the ATACMS missile, and they'll build it at Rheinmetall's site in Unterlüß, Germany. Here's why that matters. The ATACMS is a tactical ballistic missile. It reaches targets hundreds of kilometers away, and until now, America made every single one. This is the first time it will be built on foreign soil. The Unterlüß site is no startup. It's 125 years old. Around 4,000 people work there. Rheinmetall is already raising a new rocket motor plant on the grounds. Production could begin around 2027. It ramps through 2029. The target, 600 to 800 missiles a year. Enough to feed both European armies and Ukraine's front line. And this didn't appear overnight. The two firms first signed a memorandum back in 2024. They widened it in early 2025. Ankara simply made it official and public. Both governments backed the plan. Lockheed's international chief called it a watershed moment for Allied industrial cooperation. In one sense, he's right. This is European industry stepping up. Real factories, real capacity, real jobs on German soil. But hold that thought. The catch buried in the contract. But now we reach the fine print. And this is where the story turns. Because building a missile is not the same as controlling it. The ATACMS relies on American technology. That technology sits behind a wall of U.S. export law, and that wall did not move in Ankara. So even as the missiles roll off a German line, one thing stays in Washington: the final sign-off, the permission to export, the power to say yes or no. Rheinmetall's chief executive, Armin Papperger, spoke of strengthening autonomy in defense policy. It's a noble goal, but autonomy is exactly what this deal complicates. Europe gets the factory, the jobs, the supply chain, the industrial pride. America keeps the switch. We call this the autonomy paradox, and it runs through almost every deal signed in Ankara. Europe is spending like a superpower, but it's still building on someone else's blueprint. Backlogs are promises, not products. Now let's talk money, because this boom is minting winners. Rheinmetall is the poster child. Its share price has climbed roughly 400% in 3 years. In 2025 alone, it rose about 150%. The fundamentals look real too. Sales hit nearly 10 billion euros last year, up almost 30%. Its order backlog sits near 70 billion. The company expects sales to grow another 40% or more this year. Those aren't defense numbers, those are technology stock numbers. But here's the break. A backlog is a promise, it is not a product. Consider Germany's own orders. 200 Puma fighting vehicles worth over 4 billion euros. Delivery? Not before 2028. Domestic orders have doubled, yet production has barely risen. The factories are full of contracts, they're just not full of finished weapons. Not yet. Why the lag? 2 reasons mostly. Skilled labor is scarce, and supply chains stay tangled. You cannot hire a rocket engineer overnight. You cannot conjure a titanium supplier from thin air. Money, it turns out, was the easy part. Capacity is the hard part. Where the cash comes from. So where does all this cash come from? Increasingly, from Brussels itself. The European Union has proposed a defense and space budget line worth around 130 billion euros. That's roughly 10 times the previous figure. 10 times. It's building new tools to spend it. The European Defense Fund, a program called SAFE, offering loans for joint purchases. The aim is simple: make buying together cheaper than buying alone. Analysts at McKinsey put the scale in perspective. European core defense spending has already doubled since 2019. By the end of this decade, it could approach 800 billion euros a year. Yet here's the uncomfortable part they add. Europe's equipment stocks still sit below where they stood in 2021. Years of underinvestment left deep holes. Much of this spending just refills them. The continent is running hard, largely to stand still. The lock-in and the switching cost. So if Europe is rearming, surely American firms are losing out? Not quite. Often the opposite. Take the F-35 fighter jet. It's the backbone of Allied air power. Its supply chain reaches into around 2,000 firms. Once a country buys the jet, it's locked in for decades. Spare parts, upgrades, software, all flow through that system. Then there's Raytheon, now RTX. It makes the AMRAAM air-to-air missile. Demand has exploded. RTX has doubled production toward 1,200 missiles a year. Germany and Poland alone ordered more than 800. The combined backlog of America's top 5 defense firms tells the story. It crossed $1.3 trillion last fiscal year, up nearly a quarter in 12 months. Europe is spending more. But a great deal of that money still flows west, across the Atlantic, into American hands. And here's the deeper point. Analysts at Bruegel argue Europe's dependence has not shrunk since 2017. It has grown. More F-35s, more American missiles, more systems that only Washington can fully service. Every purchase solves a problem today and deepens a dependence tomorrow. Though, and this matters, Germany is quietly trying to change that. Buy European meets the fragmentation tax. Here's the twist. Germany's own procurement plan leans hard toward home. American systems make up only a small slice of it. Berlin wants German factories, German jobs, German control. That's the political fight, playing out in miniature. Brussels wants Europe to buy European. It's building funds to favor homegrown industry. The logic is sovereignty. But not everyone agrees. Poland, the Baltics, the Nordics, the states closest to Russia often want the best weapon now. And sometimes that weapon is American. Washington has lobbied hard to keep it that way. There's also a hidden cost to going it alone. Analysts call it the fragmentation tax. Europe builds too many things. Different tanks, different jets, different standards. One study found its fragmentation runs 4 times higher than America's. That means shorter runs, higher prices, slower delivery. Every duplicated system buys less security. There's no clean answer here. Rheinmetall wrote the survival manual. So how does a company win in this maze? Rheinmetall wrote the manual. Its strategy is simple. Integrate, don't isolate. It partners with American primes, Lockheed, Honeywell, Raytheon. It builds bridges instead of walls. The logic? Business moves faster than government. A deal between 2 companies can close in months. A deal between 2 governments can take years. And there's a window here, a narrow one. Analysts point to the years between now and 2032. That's when autonomy, in drones, in software, in production, is still up for grabs. Which brings us to the disruptors, the drone makers. Uncrewed systems are cheap, fast, and lethal. New ventures now pair European industry with autonomy specialists. Firms like Anduril and Baykar are rising fast. That $40 billion Drone Edge program? It's a bet the next war is unmanned. The old primes build platforms. The new players build swarms. Wall Street reprices the arsenal. Let's turn to the markets, because Wall Street and the city are watching closely. Defense stocks have soared, but investors are growing cautious. The easy gains may be over. In fact, Europe's main aerospace and defense index slipped a little in early 2026, down around 1%. Not a collapse, a pause, a market catching its breath. As one Morningstar analyst put it, investors are turning very picky and very selective. They want delivery, not just headlines. New products chase the theme anyway. Fresh defense funds now let ordinary investors buy the boom. And the recent SpaceX listing repriced an entire category. Space and autonomy assets suddenly look far more valuable. Still, a UK analyst offered a warning. The sector, he noted, has form and experiencing delays and setbacks. And then there's the host, Turkey. Ankara didn't just hold the summit. It worked the room. Washington moved to lift old sanctions. It signaled a possible return of the F-35. Britain agreed to sell 20 Typhoon jets. The host walked away a winner. Quietly, but clearly. The autonomy paradox, stated plainly. So let's state the core of it, one last time. Europe is rearming at a scale unseen in generations. It's spending, it's building, it's signing deals worth tens of billions. But Ankara revealed a dependence it cannot yet escape. The missiles may be German-made, the jets may be European-flown, yet the critical technology, the final permissions, the deepest supply chains, many still run through Washington. That's the autonomy paradox. Spending like a superpower, depending like a client. So what are we watching next? 3 things. 1. Does that ATACMS line actually open on time in 2027? Delivery is the real test. 2. Does Brussels force through buy European rules, or does Washington's pressure hold? 3. Do the drone disruptors break the old order, or do the primes simply absorb them? The answers will decide one thing, whether Europe's boom buys real autonomy or just a bigger, more expensive dependence. And that's the brief. If this episode sharpened how you see the story, then we've done our job. We don't run ads. We don't hide behind a paywall. We answer to our readers and to no one else. You can read the full investigation with every chart and source over at veritaseuropaea.eu. The written piece goes deeper on the numbers, and every claim is sourced. If you value slow journalism, the kind that follows the money and names the paradox, then stay close. A free sign-up keeps you in the loop. A membership keeps the work alive. We're the team at Veritas Europaea. Thanks for listening. And until next time, follow the money. It always tells the truth.